JohnBurrowShow.com.
You got people parking in the handicapped parking spaces that are not handicapped. As you see, the handicapped parking spaces are not wide enough, are not properly marked. The handicapped people need more than what they're getting. They need things right. That's the way I look at it.
When I have trouble breathing, if I have to walk across the parking lot from a spot out farther, I have trouble having enough breath to get in and then be able to walk through a store. To get in and out of a car, when I have my walker, when I have my chair, it's difficult to be able to maneuver, to load, to unload. People pull, even regular handicap cars will pull into a van accessible parking space thinking that's still legal, and nobody writes them a ticket. A van accessible spot is for a van only. They need that 8 feet beside them or behind them in order to be able to get a motorized chair in or out of that vehicle.
When someone unloads a wheelchair, they need room to bring it out and swing it down. You know, if you have a problem with your legs, lifting something straight, that's all the weight on you, is going to drive you to the ground. So we have people falling all the time trying to side unload to keep their doctor's appointment. So this is how it goes. Now I've got to figure out how to get back into the car past the wheelchair.
Now he's got to go and get his chair open and his pad in there so he can sit down and then close the door and get out. Now, can you see him not being able to see if there's a car coming up that aisle?
And I was actually, folks, trying not to fall. So when you're backing out, there's a large vehicle on either side of you, and I'm coming down the parking lot. You can't see me. Woo! Even when you're starting, even if you look left and right, because you're blocked by cars. I'm below that level. So basically, when they back out and we're in a one-lane lot, you're at the mercy of hoping somebody screams at the driver and you can be hurt. Does that make sense? My friend drives a big chair here in town. The gentleman that had the issue with the Sheriff's Department dread. He was run over in a parking lot by an ambulance at a nursing home in his wheelchair. I've been hit 3 times. Every time I've ever been hit in my wheelchair, it's been in a parking lot in 8 years. Most accidents, pedestrian accidents, in parking lots have some pretty severe injuries because you've got a pedestrian against a vehicle. In a wheelchair, we're even shorter. So if you look around at the vehicles all around me at my size, this is like being a Volkswagen in a tractor-trailer parking lot. They can't see me, they can't hear me, and I'm not fast enough to get out of your way. So, you know, if we don't do some active enforcement, then we're actually segregating our own populace, our own veterans from being able to utilize public goods and services, being able to access, you know, our regular stores and businesses. Why should the businesses be required under federal law, the county administration be required under federal law to spend all the money to mark handicap spots. Handicap spots are put where they're supposed to be for safety. So why would we ask them and make them spend all the money underneath the ADA Act if the sheriff is not going to enforce it? It's wasting their money, their time, and it's also costing them customers. The liabilities involved, parking lot accidents usually get blamed on the driver, even though it may not actually be something they could have prevented. So we're not just protecting handicapped citizens and other pedestrians in the lot, we're also protecting drivers from having to pay exorbitant costs for accidents that are really the fault of non-enforcement.
What can we do to get Augusta-Richmond County to actually enforce the laws that are already on the books and protect a very large portion of their population?
That you use for goods and services, service provision, and programs. We're required by federal law as a county government to make sure that access to all those programs is as complete as possible. However, if we don't have actively enforced handicap parking and someone else is parking in those spots, are we truly meeting that obligation underneath constitutional law? My answer would be no, and I'm sure that federal court would be no too. However, I think it's more, not so much in malice as it is in misunderstanding. Basically what we're looking at here is what it takes for someone to get a chair out of a vehicle that's parked tight against another vehicle in parking spots where we don't have an ADA spot available. If they were parked in, this would be the result. Have any of you ever been in the parking lot with a small child walking beside you and an SUV starts to back up? Can they see the child? They can't see me either, nor anybody else in a wheelchair. Handicap spots were placed where they're placed for safety reasons particular. I've actually taken, it's not convenience. Whenever I'm giving advice, like I actually made Wells Fargo on Peach Orchard Road, move it from the front door to the side of the building. Why? Because it was too much slope. Safety element. So when we're figuring, and when your engineers here figure handicap parking spots, they figure for the maximum amount of safety in the parking lot for pedestrians and drivers as well. So not to enforce those spots and allow other people to park them in, then puts us at safety. I've been hit 3 times in my wheelchair by a vehicle. Every time it's been a parking lot. I have another client who was run over in a nursing home parking lot here in Augusta by one of our ambulance vendors. Feeling the basic rights of those citizens. It's kind of hard to swallow. It's hard to swallow. He wants cameras down sound, but he can't afford to do basic handicap enforcement. Our lives are at risk with this, folks. I mean, people get killed in wheelchairs in parking lots more often than they do on the streets. That's about all I've got to say.
Mr. Williams, Mary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly agree with what has been said, but I'm reminded that not just this sheriff, but every sheriff has that authority that other folks have been asking for to do what he wants, when he wants, if he wants. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do want you to know that this body cannot tell the sheriff directly to do anything. What we can do, we can, I guess, communicate with him how important it is and what we understand. But because he is that agency that not just him but all sheriffs in Georgia have that authority, there's no way that as a body we can say, well, you know, the parking lots has been not been monitored like they need to be for the handicapped parking and other stuff. So all we can do is just lobby the sheriff and talk to him about it. He doesn't know how important it is. That's the issue I think that maybe the courts might have to take over care.
That's just the point. If I have to get down, which is what my plan would be if we can't get results through mediation with the Sheriff's Department, I will go straight over to the Department of Justice, right over at the courthouse here at the federal courthouse. I will take this document from the Department of Justice where he said that he would have an ADA coordinator on his staff, which he doesn't have. That's violation there. And B, that he would follow all areas of the ADA Act. But Unfortunately, if I do that, they're not going to take the money from the sheriff. They're going to take it from our citizens. And that's my concern. So I'm left with two ugly choices that neither one I want to make. And I'd like to avoid that ugly choice. Does that make sense? I don't want to cost us money to get what we need in, but I can't afford to let it go in non-compliance either.
Mr. Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Oliver, for an excellent presentation. It probably doesn't matter one way or the other, but in the envelope that you just hold up, is that the current sheriff that into that agreement? That's a previous sheriff. I mean, I don't think it really weighs one way or the other when it comes to the federal requirements, but I just want to ask the question for the record.
It was the previous sheriff, and I did make sure that the current sheriff had copies of this in case he wasn't where I wouldn't be, but it was a previous sheriff. However, you know, it would be, once you sign an agreement as a county sheriff in a department with the DOJ, they're going to hold it binding for any sheriff coming after that.
Okay. You also mentioned that you hadn't had a chance also to speak directly to him. You spoke to his PR persons or what have you. So, do you know exactly who you put that information in their hands to? Did you send it by mail or was it put in someone's hand?
It was PR chief. He asked me to email it to it. That's how I knew it was never opened, because when I sent it, I went, you know, I not only that he received it, but I wanted to know when he opened it, and it was never opened. Okay. And that was over a year ago.
Okay. I was just going to ask you, when was your last time attempt to have a dialogue with him?
That was about a year ago.
About a year ago? Okay.
And I'm willing to have an open dialogue at him any time and to show him what our concerns are. I mean, actually, you know, let him come out and look what we're facing and maybe get a better understanding. I don't think he's doing this with malice. I'm not accusing him of that. Right. I'm just saying it's something we're missing that's very important.
Okay, well, I will say for the record, I concur with Commissioner Williams, but I also concur with you said at the end of the day, with the buck stop with Augusta Richland County. And you have my word, within the next 2 weeks, I will sit down and I will attempt to sit down with the sheriff and address this conversation. I don't want to task the administrator with anything else more as of right now. I will try to sit down and have this conversation with him and try to see can we make some inroads at the end of the day. So give me about 2 weeks if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
Do you want to become a member of the Public Safety Committee?
I thought you told me to speak.
I let you speak, but I don't want you making any agreements on behalf of our committee.
No problem, Commissioner.
I've already spoken with representatives of the Sheriff's Office, and the Sheriff's Department feels that the reason the ticket writing for people that violate the handicap parking rules is the fact that an officer couldn't just drive by and see somebody illegally parked and cite them. They had to wait until the person, the operator of the vehicle, came out of whatever venue they were. This is what I was told a few days ago when I communicated with them in reference to this agenda item. However, Mr. Oliver is one of my great supporters of AIDS Friendly. If you think you may know what a person goes through that's confined to a wheelchair, you should walk around Augusta when he's in his wheelchair and see the difficulties that he has trying to maneuver, go on sidewalks that he in for no reason, telephone pole in the middle of the sidewalk, no sidewalk at all, and got to go down the street. I've been with him out there, and we've seen that. And that report that I gave the Mayor Pro Tem to look at and to Mr. Williams will show a lot of that.
So basically, but what they've done is they've used people from the community that were handicapped, with different types of disabilities, their family members or other volunteers, and actually then the costs come down to basically training them in what is appropriate to ticket and for their equipment while they're out. So you had no salaries, things like that. So it did minimize costs for the departments, and that's what I'd like to do. I know it's strapped, and he's really trying to grow the department, and I think the sheriff's doing a great job at crime prevention right now. And then something like this, I think that we could throw in some citizens and some interested parties who would be willing to help fill that venue.
And I really appreciate tremendously the fact that you don't want to take taxpayers' money to pay for a lawsuit because we're not in compliance. I do believe that this is something that can be resolved. And as chair of public safety, I'm going to follow up with the sheriff and others and see if we can get something that's concrete to rid ourselves of that particular problem.
Move to accept this information, Mr. Chair.
Second. Been moved and seconded. Any other conversation or not, please vote.
Why would we ask them and make them spend all the money underneath the ADA Act if the sheriff is not going to enforce it? It's wasting their money, their time, and it's also costing them customers.